Hey everybody, today we're going to talk a little about Arc Flash, what it is, some important things to know about it, what it does, and hopefully some steps to prevent it, make it help people not get injured, not get hurt, and make you a little bit more knowledgeable about what it is and what it can do. What is an arc flash? It's an explosive burst of heat and light caused by a sudden uncontrolled electrical arc or current passing through the air. Temperatures get as high as about 35,000 degrees Fahrenheit in just about a thousandth of a second. It happens really quick. It can vaporize metal, cause fatal burns, and generate a blast wave that can collapse workers' lungs and rupture their eardrums. Sometimes, depending on how big it is, some shrapnel will go out. There'll be some toxic gas that gets sent out, gets into people's lungs, some intense UV rays that can really mess with people's eyes and cause additional injuries. Arc flash accidents can kill in an instant, or they can cause a long, slow, and painful death, depending on how bad the burns are that you have, if you got those fumes in your lung, breathing hazards later on in life, and so forth. Even non fatal injuries from an arc flash may require months or years of medical care and therapy, again, with the lungs, with the eyesight, with the burns, getting skin grafts and stuff done afterwards. There's a lot of bad things that can happen from it. The two most common arc flash hazards are lightning and arc welding. They are arc flash hazards. However, we're not here to talk about that. We're going to talk about specifically arc flashes and how they relate to the electrical distribution and panels on the jobs. There are many variables that affect the size and energy of arc flash. Amperage, voltage, the actual gap that the arc is jumping, that the electricity is jumping from one side to the other. Remember, electricity is always looking for the closest path to ground, so that's what it's trying to find. The time that it takes to jump has an effect on it. The distance away from the arc, is it single phase? Are we talking three phase? And are we in a confined little space, or are we in a big open electric room, or are we just you open the closet door and there's the panel? So those are all factors and variables that come into the size of the arc flash and how much energy it actually puts out. As mentioned earlier, flashes can reach 35,000 degrees. The fatal burns can happen even at greater than 10 feet away. People can get some serious burns, some that'll cause fatality with it. The majority of electrical related hospital admissions are due to arc flash burns, not from shocks. But a lot of people didn't know that, but the majority of the people go into the hospital in the electrical industry because of an electrical injury. It's mainly shock and burns. The easiest, safest way to work on electrical equipment is to de-energize it. Doing this will ensure that there is no potential for an arc flash. Not always possible, but when possible, that's the easiest, safest way to do it. And then you're not worried about an arc flash. You're not worried about somebody getting hurt. You're not worried about somebody getting burned, shocked, anything. How do you de-energize correctly? Simple. Lockout, tag out. If you're working on circuits that are dead or off, but the lockout, tag out is not installed, you need to assume it's hot or energized. Never assume it's off. If you don't see the breaker off and the lockout, tag out on it, don't mess with it. Make sure you get a lockout, tag out put on it. I'm assuming everyone knows what a lockout, tag out policy is, where it's located, and I'm sure you've all been trained on it, so I'm going to skip over that for now. OSHA has made a few allowances for working circuits hot or energized. You must assess the situation and go through your own checks and balances to see if there's a valid reason that the circuit you're working on can't be shut off. If it can be turned off, then please do so. If it cannot be turned off, then please follow all OSHA guidelines to help ensure everyone's safety and that they go home safe to their families at the end of the day. That's what we want to see every day. If you have to work on circuits hot, OSHA says employers must develop and enforce safety-related work practices to prevent electric shock or other injuries resulting from either direct or indirect electrical contacts. These safety-related work practices could include energized electrical work permit, pre-work job briefing, your PPE, your personal protective equipment, make sure it's rated for whatever arc flash setting you're going to go into, whatever the calc setting is on it, make sure, or requirement is, make sure that's the suit that you're wearing. You must have your insulated tools, a written safety program, a qualified person must be attending and doing the work, don't just go grab a helper and throw them in there. You have to be qualified in order to go do the work. Make sure there's flash hazard labeling installed also. If not, get it on there. A number of approach boundaries exist, and both qualified and non-qualified persons must understand these definitions. You can see them here. We'll address those a little bit more. flash protection boundary or the outer boundary. The flash boundary is the farthest established boundary from the energy source. If an arc flash occurred, this boundary is where an employee could be exposed to a curable second-degree burn. Anything closer, it might not be curable. Limited approach, an approach limit at a distance from an exposed live part where a shock hazard exists. Restricted approach, an approach limit at a distance from an exposed live part which there is an increased risk of shock. You might not get it, but the risk increases the closer you get to it. The prohibited approach, or the inner boundary, a distance from an exposed part which is considered the same as making contact with a live part. You must be qualified in order to do this. It's considered exactly the same as working with the part live. We talked about labeling a minute ago. Arc flash labeling must be posted, which identifies approach boundaries and the PPE requirement. It'll tell you right on there the calc level of the suit that you need to wear, or if you just need to put on a shirt, or if you just need gloves and the face shield. There are many different ways to determine the appropriate boundaries. The NFPA is the quickest, easiest way. However, it's the least accurate, and it's very limited on the tasks that it covers. It doesn't cover everything, and it is not 100% accurate, but it will get you by. There's a few formulas you can find to use, and they are more accurate than the NFPA, but they are time-consuming to find, and they're very cumbersome to operate and to use and manipulate your way through the formula. There's also an approach calculator on the IEE website. This is the one that I use the most. It's quicker than the formula method, but you still are required to have a lot of information that you may or may not have available unless you're a qualified person and you know exactly what you're looking at and what you're dealing with. There's software available that will help, but they cost money. However, most of them let you make your arc flash labels and help you create your one-line drawings for the job. Remember, you must be qualified to work on an energized equipment. That means you're trained on arc flash, you know how to figure out the boundaries, and you know how to operate the distribution panel, and you are very familiar with the electrical hazards that are involved in the operation. Now, I know this was a very brief presentation on arc flash. Hopefully it contains some useful information. There's more in-depth training that we offer, which will help you become a qualified person. This is just a very brief overview. Any questions?